Welcome back, and thank you all for staying with us. Tonight on Talk of the Nation, we look at the promises of last year, where we saw that at the start of the COVID-19, Ugandans were promised that all city roads and different infrastructure projects would be completed. But as we speak, not much has been achieved. And this week we had from the Kampala Capital City Authority indicating that they would need at least 1 trillion shillings to see that all the infrastructure gets completed. Tonight on Talk of the Nation, we pick the thoughts of someone who has studied the matter in detail to get us through why these projects are taking longer and what we should actually expect. When will they get complete? Tonight we speak to Gilbert Sendugwa of Coast, Uganda. Welcome to Talk of the Nation tonight.
Thank you very much, and good evening, viewers.
Well, when you look at some of the roads like we earlier mentioned, like John Babia Avenue, which is the former Acacia Road, and Mulago Roundabout, they've been working on it for such a long time and it's taking long to be complete. Why would you say all these different roadworks are taking long?
Yeah, thank you very much. Time overruns are normal in infrastructure projects because sometimes you find that by the time a contract is signed, some of the elements had not been captured by the design. I'm not particularly sure about what has caused the delays on this particular project of Babiha Road, but you have to understand that there are many, there's a lot of infrastructure passing through that road, telephone lines, water lines, electricity lines. So shifting all these, has implications on the cost and time, especially if they were not captured in the design so that proper estimates are made. So it could be that these are some of the factors causing the delays. The other issue, I think a significant one, could be COVID-19. In between, there was the lockdown and then slowing of business, and this affected many contractors and businesses in Uganda, but also around the world. So it could be that this contractor was also affected by this fact. But I think to a citizen, the most fundamental issue should be for Kampala Capital City Authority, to inform citizens every time there is a change. They had advertised the schedule of this project. I recall, for example, they had said that shifting of existing infrastructure would last between May and July of 2019, I remember. And that construction would then begin at the beginning of August of that year. Now, almost a year passed before actual work could start. We don't know what may have caused that, and we have never heard from government to inform the public of what is the problem. The other issue is that many times when there is a variation, I said variations are normal, but what is abnormal is not disclosing the nature of variations, the reason for variations, the cost implication of those variations, and the time implication of those variations. Now, 2 weeks ago, Coast Uganda released a report, which was an assurance report on 23 infrastructure projects done by 8 agencies, including KCCA, Ministry of Works and Transport, UNRWA, and others. Now, the report highlights, I think, 5 main issues. The first issue relates to improved disclosure, looking at the amount of information that has been disclosed this time around, and as compared to 2019, we note a 19% improvement in disclosure. The disclosure was weak in 2019. The other issue that we see is the significant role played by development partners. In these 23 projects, we note that the contribution of development partners in funding these projects is 75%. And out of these, 13 are grants, while 62% are loans, while the government of Uganda or Ugandan taxpayers contribute 25%. The other issue is, and this is I think important in the context of BUBU, Buy Uganda, Build Uganda, the role of local contractors. The report finds that of these projects, 35% of the works contracts go to local contractors, while 9 go to foreign contractors. Of course, this is on the basis of what has been disclosed. The lot was not disclosed. And for supervising contracts, 43% went to foreign contractors, while only 9% went to local contractors. This should be of interest both to government and businesses here, and I think citizens, because you would want the significant part of these contracts to go to local people. By doing that, then you are building capacity for future projects. Now, the other issue that we found in this was, as Sandra has noted, time overruns. Of the 23 projects which we studied, 11 had experienced time overruns. Time overruns means that the proportion of contracts which were finished over and above the original estimated time. For example, a project was estimated to take 12 months, but then you find that it has taken 15 or 18 months. So that is time overruns. And then finally, the other issue was on cost overruns, whereby we found that of these 23 projects, 5 had actually experienced cost overruns. Now, all of these have a cost to the taxpayer and the citizen. When a project delays, if it is on the basis of borrowed funds, as we have seen that a significant part of infrastructure financing is on loans, then people are paying interest for infrastructure that they are not going to be using for some time.
Well, actually, just to cut you short there, would you say there's abuse of these processes that leads to excessive funding? Because you bring in the fact that it gets to be at the cost of a taxpayer.
It may not necessarily be abuse, it could be inefficiency, but also sometimes we know that conflicts between the client or a public agency and or the owner of the project and the contractor, sometimes delays occur as a consequence of conflicts. Some of those conflicts arise from a misunderstanding, for example, a lack of agreement on whether someone should pay something under the table or not. But other conflicts also are legitimate and are caused by other reasons. One of the common issues that we see is that the issue of delayed payments. You find that a contractor has done the work, issued a certificate, a supervising contractor has verified the work and said, the work was satisfactorily done, but then the client delays to pay, even when the money has been availed by government. So in circumstances like those, I think it is important to understand why a payment would delay when actually everything appears to have been in place. So in circumstances like those, suspicion of abuse could come up.
When every single time there's an announcement that there's need for more money, you'll usually hear Ugandans complain and say the taxpayer is going to pay. How then can we ensure, how do we work towards ensuring that all these infrastructure projects become a little bit affordable to the taxpayer?
I think the taxpayer is justified to get concerned, especially when there is talk of increasing the cost of a project. Because many times we have seen contracts which, for example, original price is 100 billion. Then you find maybe a variation of scope of 5%, but then when you look at the variation of cost, you find it is 25%. Now, that is unexplained, and most of the cases, times actually, this information is not disclosed by government. So this gives reason for taxpayers and citizens to get concerned, to ask questions so that they know if the change is this small, why should the change in price be this big? So these concerns and questions are not misplaced. Having said that, the issue of citizens getting value is very critical. How can citizens get value from infrastructure projects? I think one of the risks, based on the figures that I have read, is lack of ownership. If you have, development partners funding 75% of an infrastructure project, then citizens, to a large extent, are not engaged, are not informed, maybe are not interested. Citizens should demand that a significant proportion of local resources be dedicated to infrastructure development, because they are directly affected when infrastructure is not there or is bad.
And maybe briefly, just looking at the time in which the roadworks infrastructure projects happen, sometimes at night, sometimes during the day. And we've seen that if you're to compare Uganda and maybe some of the other countries, the roadworks usually happen in the night to allow people go about their businesses, okay. But here we see it happens during the day. How do you think it affects projects being completed on time, and also, as a citizen in Uganda? How can that be better improved?
You see, yes, a client or a government agency responsible for the project would want to ensure that there is minimum disruption of business during construction. It also is important for the contractor, because accidents and all sorts of things are minimized. But in Uganda, you have a situation where probably the choices are very limited, that you can't make a diversion because the roads are narrow, the roads are few, and therefore you have to work within what is available, which means that you have to try and work through the day and night to at least make some progress.
So both sides have to understand.
So what is needed is for government to really prioritize infrastructure investment, so that there is enough money, but also adequate infrastructure, not just for today, but for tomorrow, maybe for the next 25 years.
All right.
So that future works,
yes,
there are options to divert traffic, and work continues as scheduled.
All right, thank you so much, Gilbert Sendugwa from Coast Uganda, joining us on Talk of the Nation and speaking to us about the different infrastructure projects currently happening in the country. We'll take a short break, but NTV Weekend Edition will continue, so do not go away.